Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I thought I would give you 10 movies that I really enjoy, but the general consensus is that they're not very good movies. They could have been critically panned or audiences don't like them in general, but I personally really enjoy them nonetheless. You might agree with some of my picks, or you might just be sitting there thinking, Mike, what the hell are you talking about? These movies are awful. But at the end of the day, it's just a bit of fun. I'm not going to take offense if you don't like any of these movies. They're just ones I enjoy nonetheless. So the first movie on my list is probably my favorite movie out of these 10, and one that is very, very dear to my heart, and it is Super Mario Brothers. So yeah, I think I've got a bit of an advantage with this movie because I saw it as a kid and I loved it. So I've got that nostalgia attached to it. I think nostalgia is a very powerful tool to have when it comes to liking movies. I think if you loved it as a kid, I think you're always going to love it, regardless of what movie it is, regardless of the quality of it. And that's definitely the case here with Super Mario Brothers. It was Christmas Eve 1996 when I saw this movie. So I guess like being a young kid and it was Christmas time, it just holds a very special place to my heart. But on the whole, I still think this is a really good movie nonetheless, and I don't really get the criticisms for it. Yes, it's nothing like the video games, and I'm a fan of the video games, so I know that. But I just love like the chemistry with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo. I think they're great together. I think the movie is just a really fun adventure. I think the set design is great. I like all the other supporting characters. I just think it's a lot of fun, and it never bores me, this movie. It's never a boring film. It's just a lot of fun from start to finish. But yeah, that is Super Mario Brothers. Next up, I'm gonna go with Godzilla. So this is the 1998 remake, directed by Roland Emmerich. And yeah, I saw this movie at the cinema and I loved it. I had a blast with it. But it was only sort of years later that I realised that not many people do like this movie. And I feel like one of the main criticisms is that it's nothing like the original Godzilla movies. And I can understand that. I mean, Godzilla doesn't look anything like sort of the original Godzilla from the Japanese movies. But I still think this movie is a lot of fun. It's got that great sort of like disaster movie element that we got with Roland Emmerich's Independence Day. It's got a very sort of similar tone to that movie. And yeah, I just really, really enjoy it. I do think some of the acting is not that great. Matthew Broderick, he's never really been one of my favourite actors. I do think his acting is a bit suspect in this film. And some of the other actors they have in this movie, they just seem like strange choices. But nonetheless, I still really, really have a great time with it. That is Godzilla, 1998. Next up, I'm going to go with a sequel, and this is the third part of a trilogy, and it is RoboCop 3. So yeah, I think the sequels to RoboCop in general are not very well liked, but I feel like the third one gets a lot of the hate. But I think it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I seem to remember reading that when RoboCop 2 came out, it was criticised for being too dark, too violent, and too mean-spirited. So when they made 3, they decided to tone down the violence and make it a bit more, not child-friendly, but more accessible to younger audiences. And then when the movie came out, it got criticised for doing that. So it's like they can't win. They can't be too violent, and then they can't tone down the violence either. And I think that's a bit unfair. But yeah, like I said, I think this movie is a lot of fun. There are some criticisms I do understand. The samurai robots are a bit weird. The fact that Peter Weller's not in the movie is a bit of a disappointment. But I think there's a lot of great moments in this film. Some great action sequences. I really enjoy this film. Is it as good as the first two? Not at all, but I still have an absolute blast with it nonetheless. That is RoboCop 3. Next up, I'm going to go with a Sylvester Stallone film that was released in the 90s, and I think the 90s is arguably his worst decade for film, but I still think he had a lot of good movies in that decade. Assassins and Daylight, I think they're very underrated, but the movie I'm going to go with here is Judge Dredd. So yeah, I can understand the criticisms for this film. I know a lot of people don't like it because it's not really like the comics. Dredd takes his helmet off, all that kind of stuff. And I do get it, but Personally, I still think this movie is a lot of fun. And controversially, I would rather watch this movie than the Carl Urban one. I think the Carl Urban one is great, but it's not as fun. And, you know, if I want to watch a fun action movie and I want it to be Judge Dredd, I'm going to put this one over it. Yeah, that might be quite a controversial opinion, but I just think this movie is fun, good action movie. Got no real complaints for it. So yeah, that is Judge Dredd. Next up, I'm going to go with a movie that I kind of held off seeing for the longest time because I just heard really bad things about it. But when I finally watched the film, I was genuinely quite surprised at its quality, and that is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. So yeah, I don't know, I really enjoyed this movie. I was all set to hate it, and I came out absolutely loving it. I will say that the only version of this movie I've seen is the extended cut. I've never watched the theatrical. I've heard it's not very good, so I've kind of just stuck to the extended cut, and I really like it. I like this movie more than Dark Knight Rises. I even like it more than The Batman that came out recently this year. I know that's probably going to be a very controversial opinion, but when I watch this movie, all I can picture is The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. I just think this movie is a great sort of comic book adaptation. On the whole, I really like all the casting. I think the only one I don't really like is Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. But I feel like maybe that was more a problem with how Zack Snyder decided to take the character. I thought it was a bit of an odd route to take that character. But other than that, I just have an absolute ball with this movie, and yeah, I don't really understand the criticisms it gets, especially when you compare it to like some of the other movies the other sort of DC movies that have come out from this era. I think this one stands up amongst the rest, but I'm probably in the minority here. But yeah, that is Batman v Superman. Next up, I'm going to go with another third movie in a trilogy, and it is Scream 3. Now, once again, I can totally understand the criticisms to this movie. It's a lot more comical, less violent, but I think the reason why it went for that route is because around the time it was about to go into production, the Columbine High School Massacre occurred, and people started looking towards violence in movies and video games as a possible reason as to why that incident occurred, and Scream 3 was one of the movies that fell victim to that. And I remember reading that the producers decided that they didn't want the movie to be as violent, and they wanted to sort of make it more comical, because the previous movies do have comedy in them, but not as much as this one. So I can understand the criticisms to this movie, and yeah, it is a bit of a disappointment when you compare it to the first two, but I still really enjoy this movie, and I like it a hell of a lot more than Scream 4. I know that's probably another controversial opinion. I think some of the sort of twists in the story, especially with the reveal of the killer, is not the best, but on the whole, I find this movie a lot of fun, very entertaining, and I think it's a solid closure to the original trilogy. I kind of feel like they could have just left it there, and it could have been the end of Sidney Prescott's story, but obviously not, as we've had a couple more Scream movies after. But I still really enjoy this film. I have a lot of fun with it. That is Scream 3. Next up, I'm going to go with a movie. It's another Wes Craven movie, and it's probably the most sort of unknown movie out of the 10, but one that it doesn't really seem to get a lot of love when I talk about it with other people, and it is Shocker. So yeah, I love this film. I think this movie is so fun. It's probably the wildest horror movie I have ever seen in my life. It stars Mitch Pileggi, who is probably best known for playing Walter Skinner in the X-Files series. But he plays this serial killer who gets killed in the electric chair, but then he finds a way to come back. But he is absolutely brilliant in this film. He is just absolutely chewing the scenery. It's like the hammiest acting you'll ever see, but I just think this movie is so goddamn fun. It's hilarious, it's gory, it's not really scary, but it's just such an entertaining horror movie. And if you know other Wes Craven movies that are kind of a similar tone, then you know exactly what you're going to be getting into with this movie. But like I say, it doesn't really seem to get a lot of love. I don't think I've met anyone else who enjoys this movie as much as I do. But yeah, I love it. That is Shocker. Next up, I've got another sequel in a franchise, and again, another Sylvester Stallone movie, and it is Rocky 5. So yeah, I've always liked this movie. Yeah, it is definitely my least favorite of the franchise, but I don't hate it. I still really like it. I like the fact that it kind of took a different route. I hear a lot of people criticize this movie because it doesn't have a boxing match at the end, and I'm just kind of like, well, after 4 movies, do we really need to see another boxing match in the ring at the end? I kind of like that this movie tries to go a different route. It feels a bit more fresh. Yeah, the execution is not great, but I still really enjoy it. I think the worst aspects of the film are probably the scenes with like Rocky's son. Yeah, they're kind of annoying, I guess, but I like the sort of the story with Rocky sort of training this new young fighter who ends up being more of a problem for Rocky and ends up becoming his enemy. I just really enjoy it. Yeah, it is my least favorite of the franchise, but I don't really think it deserves the hate that it gets from a lot of people. So yeah, that is Rocky 5. Next up, I've got a movie that probably isn't as well known as some of the others, but it doesn't really seem to get much love whenever I talk about it with people, and it is Multiplicity, starring Michael Keaton. So yeah, maybe it's because I've got a soft spot for Michael Keaton. He is one of my favourite actors, but nonetheless, I think this movie is hilarious. It makes me laugh every time I watch it. It's kind of got like really silly sort of Weekend at Bernie's kind of vibes to it. Michael Keaton plays this dad he's got a busy family life, he's overworked, and he just doesn't have any time for himself. But he discovers this place that can make clones for you. So he goes there and clones himself, and the idea is that he can use his clone to kind of do some of the errands that he has to do, and take some of the weight off his shoulders so he can have more time to just chill out. But as you can imagine, it kind of escalates and it goes a bit haywire, and the movie goes a bit crazy, and before we know it, we have multiple Michael Keatons. We end up having, I think, four Michael Keatons in the movie, and just the scenes with all 4 of them together are they're so funny. And I think this movie is a testament to how funny Michael Keaton can be as an actor. He's known for being quite serious, Batman and a lot of his more recent dramas, but I think you forget that he was a great comedian, a great comic actor, and yeah, this movie is definitely a testament to that, and I absolutely love it. But that is Multiplicity. So last movie now, and I wanted to save this movie till last because I think out of all the ones I've shown, this one is considered the worst, and it's possibly considered one of the worst movies of all time. And you're probably all going to be scratching your heads when I show you what it is. But it is Jaws: The Revenge. So yeah, I'm just going to say it. I like this movie. Is it a great movie? No, of course not. But I still really enjoy it nonetheless. I think this movie is better than Jaws 3. I think Jaws 3 is the only one in the franchise that I really struggle with, and I find it very unwatchable in places. But I just think this one has a little bit more to it. It's still not a good movie, but I still really like it. One of the most common criticisms I hear about this film is that it's very silly and that it's very unrealistic. But, it is a Jaws movie. I mean, are any of the Jaws movies in the franchise realistic? They're all silly. They're all unrealistic movies. I'm not saying this one is in the same league as the original. Absolutely not. The original is a classic, but I still really enjoy Jaws: The Revenge nonetheless. I guess it's one of those movies that you could say it's so bad it's good, but I feel like a lot of people just say it's so bad it's bad. But for me, it's in the so bad it's good category. I have a lot of fun with it. So there you go, guys. Those are 10 movies that I really enjoy, but generally seem to be hated amongst most people. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments any of your choices. Are there any movies that you really like that most people seem to dislike? I would love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, I will leave the video there, guys. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. So take care, guys.